St. Peter and Paul. Now it's in two parts, so we'll focus on this first part. So I want you to pretend you don't see the second part. So this was a great addition when it arrived for the Irish monks. It meant that the monastery of Glendalough was such an important place that they were going to get their own, cathedral. So this part is known as the nave. It was built in the late 10th century. So a wonderful addition. So we have to pretend we have a roof. We don't have a massive hole over there, because you have to kind of have a look at this architecture. The only light coming into a cathedral of this size were these two windows at the side. That's it, nothing else. Now you can imagine the elements here, the wind and the rain. So they often would have put sackcloth up there. On the ground they covered it with straw and hay. So it was dark, it would have been wet, it would have been damp, and it would not have been somewhere you wanted to spend too much time. Now the Irish at this point, we were falling way behind the rest of Europe. So the messages were coming over from Rome all the time, telling us Irish to catch up with the rest of Rome. And this is when this part happened, less than 100 years later, 80 years later. This is known as the nave. Now it might look the same, but my goodness, it's completely different, and I'll tell you why. Just here, initially, you have this beautifully decorative archway. Now that was amazing for its time, because they imported that Oolithic limestone. It comes from the Dundry quarries, which is over in Bristol, over in England. And so they brought it all the way over here. The best part was to come with this addition of this window here. Now can you imagine, at the time they had these beautiful manuscripts, and even then the manuscripts, the colours they had was absolutely phenomenal. They would have had reds and greens and yellows, purples, blues even, and golds. So they began to change things. They began to whitewash the walls, hang colourful manuscripts. So then the addition of this massive window, which is facing east, compared to what we have behind, massive window facing east. And then a local king paid for stained glass, which would have cost more than gold. So they had the head sticking through it. So the idea was that in the early morning sun, as it rises from the east, it would come through this huge window, and then it would light up the whole cathedral. So you literally went from a dark, kind of dingy place to be this beautiful, bright cathedral in the space of 8 years. A little bit of a change. And what I wanted to show you is just these graves here, all around us. All of these people, these are wealthy. These are the guys who had a bit of this, and certainly would have been influential in Wicklow. This time, when they were buried inside a cathedral, they would have believed that, sort of white and slate clean, no matter what they'd done in their previous life, it didn't matter. Bury yourself inside a cathedral, you're going that direction. Now the walls are covered with graves. They're only brought in for safekeeping. 2 of them are not graves. I'm going to show you these. These are very unusual. Not too many can survive. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the Stations of the Cross inside Catholic Church depicting the crucifixion of Christ. These are similar. Here we have the cross, and then we have actually the dice where they threw for lottery for our Lord's soul. Now these would have been strategically placed all around the monastery, and the monks would have walked around saying their prayers as they went by each one. Just up here, the buildings of the 10th and 11th century, all like this, all full of holes. This is how they built. They used timbers, and they stood on top of the timbers, and they just kind of built it like this. And then, of course, when they pulled them out, they never shored up the holes. It's a great place for an nesting bird, but they look very similar to the architecture of that era. What I want to do is bring you up to this special little altar. Not too many can survive intact. This one does. It's the very beginnings of altars. Now later on in churches, a lot of times wealthy people would pay for the addition of an altar, so they tended to get very ornate and beautiful, and then they would have put them up the top of an altar or a church to show them off. In the very beginning, they just used them. They're just basic things. And so this one is important because the ombre has the 2 elements, which is this little part here, like a little bowl called a piscina. So when you pour your water through that, it just comes out there. So they just would have literally laid out their chalices, their books, washed whatever here, and it came out. So 6 of those remain in Ireland. That's one of them. In the corner is kind of an unusual stone. It's unique to Glendalough. It shouldn't be there, but it just shows you that the monks were good at DIY, because they had damage. They took a balling stone, which is like one of those grinding stones, and just shored up a big hole that they had. The other thing I want to show you, which is unique to Glendalough, you won't see these too many other places, are the graves. These. See the age there, aged 106, which is phenomenal. There are over 20 of these in Glendalough. amazing. Sometimes, you know, there might be an isolated one here, and there were 20 of them. It's kind of a bit of a phenomenon. But this is during a time, the average age was 40. If you made it to 40, that's okay. 60, unbelievable. 106, that was a lot. Now, there's theories, there's all sorts of theories into Wicklow as to why people lived longer here. Arthur Guinness, he picked his plant in Dublin, St James's Gate, for a reason. Reason being that 8 million litres of water comes every day from the Wicklow Mountains. Right, so maybe it's something to do with the water. There's also, you know, they always had breweries here on monasteries, and so they also had distilleries. And so whiskey in Irish is Ishkevacha. In English it means whiskey or water of life. So perhaps a little drink every day kept you alive up here, I don't know. But there's over 20 of these, and they don't really know why, but there's a lot of them, and you'll see them around the monastery. I'm going to bring you down to the crawl.